In this video session, I want to cover an important topic called as an structures. So before entering into the structure definition and its declaration, I want to just glance the importance of the data type. So as we have seen in the previous classes, whenever based on the size of the our data to store into the particular memory location, we have a different type of data. One is we have a data type called as an int. So if our data to be stored in the memory is of the maximum of an 2 bytes, then in such cases we go for the declaration of the data type is nothing but an integer. So the integer type of data will accommodate two memory locations. And similarly, when we want to store a character, it will store an one byte of an memory location. Similarly, when we want to store an floating type of a data, then it will store 4 bytes of data. So these are all the basic or primitive data types. So these data types will give a significance that the depending upon the range of the data, range of the value we want to store into the memory location, based on that one, smaller memory location area, smaller the content, then we go for an character type. If the content is going to be of a larger value, then we go for the integer, and otherwise we go for the float or a double, and so on. So these data types will intimate to the compiler that it has to reserve the so much of memory location to store its larger values. So the same way, whenever we use any kind of an these kind of data types, how we will declare means, we will declare by the type of the data it is going to be storing, either maybe an int or a char or a float, and the followed by the its variable. So the variable what we have used in this example is num. So num is the variable which is of the data type called as an integer. Same way, suppose if we use another for data, another type of data called as an user defined data types. So in the user defined data types, we have two kinds of data types. For our simplicity, we have used one is array, another one is called as an structures. So why we are using an array means, for example, if we use if we want to store a number, and that number is going to be an integer, so we will declare as an int num. Suppose if we want to store another number called as an 18 in another variable called as an num1. So if our demand is to store hundreds of number, then we have to declare num, num1, num2, so on up to the 99. So for 100 datas of the same type, we have to declare the 100 types of the variables. So instead of going for that one, we use an alternative option called as an array. So what that array does is, array is going to be reserving the certain sequential memory location to store the similar type of data of the different users. ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಯೂಸರ್ಸ್ಗಳದ್ದ ಸೇಮ್ ಕಂಟೆಂಟ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಸ್ಟೋರ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂದರೆ ನಾವು ಅರೇಸನ್ನು ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಹೌ ಎನ್ ಅರೇ ಇಸ್ ಡಿಕ್ಲೇರ್ಡ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಸೇಮ್ ಆಸ್ ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ದಿಸ್ ಡೇಟಾ ಟೈಪ್ ಡಿಕ್ಲರೇಷನ್, ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ರಿಟರ್ನ್ ಟೈಪ್ ಈಸ್ ಅನ್ ಇಂಟಿಜರ್ and the name of the variable is nothing but num. Same way, here in an array also we will declare as int is the type of data, and the variable name is nothing but array name is a num, and it is going to be having an 10 value. What this 10 indicates is, so 10 sequential memory locations are going to be reserved for storing the 10 different datas of the type called as an integer. So 10 different integer values are stored in the array. Similarly, in our this module we have an advanced version. So we are not having an only the intention to store the similar type of data, but if we want to store the dissimilar type of data. For example, I will give an example called as an students. So when we consider the students information, in that student information, the student is going to be identified by the certain ID called as an university seat number. And university seat number means, you know that one, it is having an integers, it is having an character, so it is a combination of all these things. And when and it is also, the student is referred by his name in the sense it is an character type. and whenever we consider his age, it is assumed to be an integer type. So we have a different type of data belonging to the same user. So in such cases, we will not use an array. So arrays are only used for storing the similar type of data. Whenever we want to store a dissimilar data belonging to the particular user, then we go for the structure. So how the structure is going to be defined means it is same as that of the integer type declaration. As we use in an this data type called as an int and a num, same way int is nothing but the data type. So same way we have our own customized data, and our data name or a data type is called as a student. Student is the data type, that is a user defined data type, and the variable what we have used in an earlier case is a num. Same way we use a variable name called as an s1. So s1 is the variable of the type called as an student. So here I have given an example called as, so the structures are used for the storing of an dissimilar or an similar type of data. So the structure of this syntax of an structure is always it is referred by the struct as the reserved word, and it is followed by the tag name. Tag name is nothing but the name of the structure, and the within that curly braces, so members, member 1 which is of the type called as in type 1, member 2 of the type 2, so on. So same way I have given an example called as, so how the structure for the student is mentioned means, so for a student we are considering the student name and student roll number and student's average marks. So the name is of the type called as an character. So in that one we use a name as an array, because the name is going to be a combination of the characters, and the roll number is of the type called as an integer. Then his average marks is going to be considered as an floating type. So we use an character type data, we use an integer type data, and also we use a floating type data, but all these different type of data belonging to the same user called as a student. So another example I have given as, struct is the name of the word, and the reserved word is followed by the structure name called as a books. So in this books, books, the title is used, author name is used, and the book ID is used. So the title and the author name are belonging to the array of a character type, and the book ID is of an integer. So here the books is going to be the type of the structure, and having the variable called as b1 and b2. And one more is how these structures are going to be structure variables are going to be defined. So an example is structure and followed by the type and its members, so on. So it will be followed by the variable names called as an v1, v2, v3, so on up to the vn. So v1 is the type of the variable belonging to the structure type. So same way I have given an example called as struct is the reserved word, and in this one the we use a different type of an this basic data types called as an name is the character type data, roll number is an integer, and average marks is a floating, and the structure name is going to be the student, and it is followed by the variables are CSE and ISE. CSE is going to CSE is a one type of a variable having all these parameter name, roll number, and average marks. Similarly, ISE is another structure variable, so which is having all these kind of the content. I think we will see here how these structure variables are going to be can be initialized. As we use in case of an conventional way of this integer type, so int num is equal to 10. So 10 is the value which is assigned to the variable name called as a num, and it is of the data type called as an integer. Same way we will assign or we will initialize these structure by giving an example here. So the struct is the reserved word, and the name of the structure is nothing, and the variable is nothing but an CSC. So CSC is a variable of the type called as a student, and in this CSC we have an three important parameter: student name is there, and his roll number, and then it is followed by the average marks. So what we will initialize is student name is nothing but it is of the array type of a name, and that name is nothing but a RAM, and the second parameter which is assigned is 18. 18 belongs to the roll number, and 87.5 is nothing but his average marks. So we will initialize the values to the variable called as an CSC, and it is of the data type called as an student. So in this structure we have a name, and we have the content called as a roll number and average marks are the three different data types. So how we will access these data? Access in the sense how we can retrieve the content from the memory, or how we are going to be writing the content into the memory means we have a special operation called as a dot operation. So whenever we want to access anything from the particular structure, we use an structure name and followed by the dot, and it's a variable. For example, I want to get a name of the structure called as a student, and in that case what I will use is I use a very simple operation. So student with the name called as an the CSC and dot name. So CSC dot name is nothing but it is accessing the name of the particular data type called as a CSC, and in that one either I can get the data from the memory or I will store the content into the memory.